So IHMA Kerala State Chapter conducted a series of 50 sessions of free webinar series, and this is season 2. And dear participants, we are going to conclude it by today. And before starting the session, I would like to tell you that only permitted recording alone will be uploaded in the YouTube, because some recording consists of information of patient which couldn't be disclosed in the internet. So I request all the members to make fruitful use of all the webinars. And before starting the session, never forget to salute our master, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. We feel very grateful for him. As a homeopath, we should all our credit to him, because without him, we are nothing today. So thank you so much, Master. And today as a speaker, we have Dr. Yashika Arora along with Dr. Deepu CS. So first of all, I would like to introduce Dr. Yashika Arora. Dr. Yashika Arora is PHMS from NHMC, Nehru Homeopathy Medical College and Hospital, and pursuing her MD in Homeopathy Maitreya Medica from DKMM HMC Aurangabad. Dr. Yashika decorated with various glorious achievements and presented paper at All India Congress by HMAI at Patna with the topic Utility of Talcamara in the Wards. She is a speaker at various events like one-sided disease in National Homeopathy Congress, at CME organized by DHMA, at Doctors Meet, Chandrapur, Maharashtra, and many more. She is master in printing and articles, magazines, and journals at various events. So Dr. Yashika, she achieves many awards along with appreciation awards by Board of Homeopathy System of Medicine, Homeopathy Iconic Award by Delhi Homeopathy, and Chikitsa Seva Award by Bharatiya Homeopathy Panel, and a Young Homeopathy Association Award by South Delhi Homeopathy Association, and many more. So a young lady with every talent in a single roof. Welcome, doctor. You can start the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anupriya ma'am. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, IHMA and Homeopathy 360 for giving me the opportunity to present my views as well as my knowledge, share my knowledge with the participants. And I'm glad to come here, join you guys again today. So thank you so much. First of all, let me just thank Dr. Deepu, Dr. Anupriya, Dr. Sri Lakshmi, Dr. Saji, and Dr. Ranjit, as well as the team of Homeopathy 360, Mr. Manish Jain, the director of Vision Publishers, as well as my whole team who has been, as well as the whole team of Homeopathy 360 who have been so generous to give me the opportunity to present my session again on this platform. To the IHMA members, the whole team, as well as the Homeopathy 360 team, thank you so much. So without wasting any more time, I think people are waiting. So let me just begin with the webinar, and I will share my screen. So I hope my screen is clear.
Yes, doctor. But you should make in full screen.
Full screen. Yeah, I'm just give me a second. Yeah, is it
Yeah.
fine now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Today's topic for my session is nasal polyp. That is the role of homeopathy in the in cases of nasal polyp, as well as what is actually nasal polyp when a patient comes to you. Is there any scope of homeopathy when you talk about nasal polyp, as there is a presumption that nasal polyp can only be managed by can be managed by surgical methods. So we guys have taken this topic, tonsillitis as well as nasal polyp. So I would be discussing on nasal polyp, and Dr. Deepu would be discussing on tonsillitis. So I'll just begin with my session. So first of all, I want to summarize what is actually nasal polyp. When you talk about nasal polyp, if a patient is coming to you, practical aspect, if you see, if a patient is coming to you of nasal polyp, what he will complain? So what he'll complain is, the person may come to you and say that there is some painless swelling, painless growth, or something there in his nose, on the lining of the nose especially, or the sinus where inside of the nose. So he'll be complaining there is some painless growth, painless swelling, or something. Since something swelling is being felt inside the nose, he may say that that swelling is somewhat soft, and the lining, it's on the lining of the nasal passage, or wherever our sinuses are there. So when you talk about this nasal polyp, when you examine them or when you see them, so you can see this on the screen. I'll just hide this. So you can see on the screen that this is a soft benign growth, which is a painless growth, which will be painless in character, and they'll hang down on the lining of the nasal passage, like their teardrops, or like grapes are there, the shape of the grapes. So you can see this nasal polyp like this. This is the view of nasal polyp. So when you talk about this hang down nails, so before we begin and we see where are these located and where is this nasal polyp formed, let's just revise the anatomy of nose. So when you talk about nose, you have so many sinuses. Everybody knows that this is the frontal sinus, the ethmoid sinus is there. We study like this. So these are the frontal sinus, the ethmoid sinus you can see on the screen. Where is the maxillary sinus, and the turbinates they are formed, the superior turbinate, the middle turbinate, and the inferior turbinates. We'll study what is the difference between the turbinates and the nasal polyp when you are examining or when you are dealing with the case of nasal polyp. So you can see the nasal cavity, the sinus's location, and where is the nasopharynx, oropharynx, larynx. How is the anatomy of this nose? How is it located? So everybody can see this frontal sinus, where is it located? So what you will have is, when you see a case of nasal polyp, mainly the sinuses area, the lining of the nasal passages, or the sinuses, where the sinuses are located, there you will have the tendency of nasal polyp is more prone. So what you can see is they'll be appearing often in an area where the sinuses are there and near the nose. Near the nose, you can see this is how we study the sinuses. These are the 5 fingers. So you can see the frontal sinus, the ethmoidal sinus, and maxillary, and every sinus. So where the sinuses are near the eyes and the nose and the cheekbones, they all which drain through the passage of the nose, the nasal passage. So there you'll have more tendency for the formation of nasal polyp. So you can see this. There is frontal sinus, there is sphenoid sinus. The turbinates can be seen in an individual. The tonsils can be seen. So you should be strong at anatomy, the medicine part, that look the physiology, the anatomical parts, and then only you can sort the case, because you will get to know the cause of the nasal polyp, how it began, how it started, how it occurred in a patient. So you should note this. And when you talk about this soft palate, adenoid is there, and then the opening of the eustachian tube is there. So here all the ethmoid sinus is there, and the maxillary sinus. So these are the locations, mainly the locations of frontal sinus and this sinuses and passages near the nose. See, I've brought a picture, another view of this picture, where you can clearly see the frontal sinus. The nasal septum is there, which is dividing, and the ethmoid sinus is there. Mainly the ethmoidal sinus and the frontal sinus are being affected. And when you talk about nasal polyps, where do they occur? See, the frontal sinus and the ethmoidal sinus, they're coming, and the nasal polyp is formed in between. You can see. Or when you talk about the sinus drainage, which is being blocked below this nasal septum, and there is maxillary sinus coming, so there is another formation of another nasal polyp. So you can see where do they form actually, where do they occur, what is the location of nasal polyp. When you talk about their prevalence, so there are, when you talk about India, so there are 10 million cases that are occurring per year of nasal polyp, and they can affect anyone, but they are most common in the young and middle-aged adults. So they have a tendency to reoccur. See, if a person has already been affected with nasal polyp, he can again generate nasal polyp in his life. So you should note this, that this is there is a recurrent tendency. So you need to correct that recurrent tendency, and we are very blessed to be to be homeopaths, because we have a constitutional treatment, and we can stop this recurrent tendency of nasal polyps through our constitutional medicines. So when the patient will come, what he can say to you, that he may say a history of asthma to you. I have a history of asthma in my childhood, or I have asthma. Or he may say ki he is having recurrent upper respiratory infection, or coryza, or recurrent sneezing, or sinusitis, or any of the infection which he may complain of. He may say ki he has allergy to dust, allergy to pollens, allergy to many of the things. Or he may also say there is drug sensitivity to many drugs like ibuprofen, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And or he may also give you a history of immune disorders, that is autoimmune disorders, which affect and make a patient more prone to develop nasal polyp. So these are the risk factors actually, which patient will come to you and say he's having asthma. Because what will happen in asthma, the airway may become swollen, or it may become narrow, it may be inflamed. And so the patient may develop nasal polyp if he's having asthma, or if he's having a history of asthma. And if you talk about this sensitivity, they may be sensitive to many of the drugs like we already discussed, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Ibuprofen, he may be sensitive, he may develop nasal polyp, or he may develop pain, or he may develop many of the things, allergies after having ibuprofen, or aspirin even. So yes, can be. Or he may be having a history of sinusitis. So sinusitis is obviously it will develop a symptom of sneezing, there will be blockage, there will be nasal problems. He may complain of nasal problems. When you talk about allergy to allergic sinusitis, so the patient having an history of sinusitis, he may also develop nasal polyp in further life. Or when you talk about immune disorders, which we were discussing in the last slide, cystic fibrosis, there may be a hereditary tendency in the patient. If a patient or a child, or somebody who is young at age, who is in childhood, so he may develop nasal polyp. The main cause which can come up is due to cystic fibrosis. Everybody knows that cystic fibrosis is a genetic disorder wherein there is a chromosomal change. So this chromosomal change can result in abnormally thick sticky fluids which may come in the body, which may be there present in the body. There may be thick fluids accumulated inside the body, and that thick fluid may be the thick mucus which may occur in these nasal or the sinus linings, and that mucus when accumulated may result in the formation of nasal polyp in children. So yes, this is one of the feature. And there is another patient who is at risk of nasal polyp is Churg-Strauss syndrome, which is a rare disease that causes inflammation of blood vessels. So when the blood vessels inside your nose and around the area may become inflamed, may become swollen, may become red, or due to any infection they may be affected, so they may develop nasal polyp. So the patient may even give you a history of Churg-Strauss syndrome, that is eosinophilic granulomatous with polyangiitis. When you talk about vitamin D deficiency, vitamin D deficient people who is having vitamin D deficiency, somebody coming to you that he's having joint pains, he's having leg pains, and you suspect that he may have deficiency of vitamin D. So such patients having vitamin D deficiency may also complain to you and come to you for this nasal polyp complaint, because the body doesn't have enough vitamin D, and they will develop inflammation. They'll develop nasal polyps, growths inside the nose even. And the genetic variations if there is a history of nasal polyp, yes, there is a tendency being seen that there is a hereditary tendency that those people who are having a family history of nasal polyp, so they may also develop nasal polyp. So you should summarize it like this, that anybody having sinusitis, anybody having rhinitis, rhinosinusitis, or there is any ciliary, we have cilia inside, ciliary motilities disorders are there, or there is accumulation of mucus inside the nose, or there may be genetic disorders, there may be immune disorders associated, like Young syndrome, Cartagner syndrome. So there are many things which are being associated, and that may lead to formation of nasal polyp inside the nose, or they may be affecting an individual. So now we are going to study how does a polyp actually develops, what is the pathology behind, what is the pathophysiology behind it. So what happens is we have mucosa inside the nose, like everybody knows, and the mucosa is there. That is a wet layer which protects us inside the nose and the sinuses, and also humidifies. That mucosa is responsible for humidifying creating moisture for the air we are breathing inside. That is dry air, and the mucosa helps to humidify it. So what happens is, if there is any infection, or there is any allergy, or there is any irritation inside the nose which is occurring, what may happen is there may be the mucosa may become swollen, they may become red, or they may become inflamed. The mucosa inside the nose, and swollen mucosa may produce fluid which may drip out, that may come out as coryza, you can say. So when this goes on for the long time, the prolonged irritation is there, the swelling is there, or there is redness inside the mucosa has become red. So when it goes on for the longer time, for chronic time, it may form a polyp. And this polyp grows usually in the inflamed tissue, which is being inflamed, at the part which is being inflamed, and it appears like a round growth that we have seen in the first slide. Round growth like a small cyst. You can see small cyst may be there. That is a soft swelling which may be there, and which may be blocking the nasal passage. So you should note that the end product of this edema, this swelling, the redness which is occurring in the mucosa, results in the formation of polyp, and these polyp usually occur. The marked area which is there is ethmoidal sinus, the area around the ethmoidal sinus, the middle turbinate. So you should note this thing, that the small cells of the ethmoidal labyrinth, the labyrinth around the ethmoidal sinus, so mucous membranes swells up there, so become swollen up, and they occupy all the lumen, and then they project the ostium into the nose, and that will result in the formation of that growth, which we call as nasal polyp, that we are discussing today. So see, you can see there, this ethmoidal sinus area. Ethmoidal sinus area is the most prone. We discussed that the ethmoidal sinus and the middle turbinate. See, you can see the middle turbinate as well as the ethmoidal sinus area. These are the most common locations where a nasal polyp may develop. They may develop at other areas also, but they are most commonly found in this turbinate region, middle turbinate region, or the ethmoidal sinus region. See how the normal cilia is there, which is propelling the mucus and the particles out of the sinus. They help to, the normal cilia helps to propel out to propel out the mucus and trap whatever particles are there inside the nose, they throw out. We know we know that the cilia, what is the function of the cilia. So these cilia may become paralyzed when there is sinusitis, or when there is any inflammation inside the nose, become congested, sinus become congested, there is mucus. And this chronic sinusitis, when it is damaging the cilia, and the other parts of the body, this may result in the formation of polyp or, around the area of ethmoidal sinus mainly and the turbinate region, because the lining, the mucosal lining becomes thick, scarred. There may be a formation of a scar. See how this nasal polyp obstruct the nasal passage, how it develops. There is mucus inside the sinus and the sinus is there. And when there is a formation of polyp inside the nose, see the first picture, how this, where do we see this nasal polyp location? When a patient comes to you, you may see it inside the nose when you examine it, and that nasal polyp is blocking that passage as well as obstructing that passage to come, so that the mucus won't be able to come or perform its function, and this may be creating irritation. This may create many of the problems which we'll be discussing, like breathing problems would be there, the nasal polyp symptoms which may be occurring because of this obstruction which is happening inside the nasal passage. What are the types? When you talk about types of nasal polyps, you may see two types of nasal polyps coming to you patient when a patient comes to you. So the first patient may complain of a rise from maxillary sinus, that the polyp has arisen from maxillary sinus, and is usually that polyp is usually unilateral, that is, it will occur either on the right side, either on the left side. When you talk about ethmoidal sinus, the second type is ethmoidal, which arise from ethmoidal sinus. So there may be multiple polyps when they are seen, and bilateral on both sides, and the middle turbinate is also involved. So you can see this may the multiple, when you see multiple polyps, just go and think and just remember always that that may be ethmoidal polyp, that may be arising from ethmoidal sinus. And when you see a single polyp which may be at unilateral side, like either on the right side or on the left side, so you may suspect that it may have arisen from maxillary sinus. So accordingly the treatment will go on, and accordingly you will be looking for it. So this is a blurred picture, but yes, I've posted it because here you can see clearly how the how we have studied this enterocornal polyps, how they occur from the maxillary sinus. See the location on the left side where they are occurring, enterocornal polyp. And the other one can be seen on the middle, that is the multiple polyps which may be occurring in the from the ethmoidal sinus. So there may be hypertrophy seen. The polyp may form from the ethmoidal sinus, where there may be turbinates of the nasal passage, and you can see that mulberry type of hypertrophy may be seen during these nasal polyps formation. See, this is a picture which shows you clearly that what is actually the normal nose. When you talk about moderate, which is a moderate polyp, which is somewhat a moderate growth, not much affecting. And when you see this see the third picture, third nose picture, wherein you can see that the swelling has grown. So that becomes a severe nasal polyp. And when the nasal polyp has have occupied the maximum of that left nasal passage, so you can see that this is the obstructive nasal polyp, and this is going to affect the patient so much. So the patient may have to go for other things, which other treatments. So one must note, one being a homeopath, you must also know where your limitations lies, and whatever you where the stage of the patient is, what is the actual prognosis of the case when you are dealing with the case. So you should note each and every aspect, each and everything, that if what is the actual pathology, what is the stage of the disease, what is the seat of the disease, then only commit to the patient. So when these nasal polyp occur, normal, moderate, severe, obstructive, you may see some of the features. Like when you talk about normal polyps, they may be presenting as just asymptomatic if there is a small nasal polyp, or they may even complain of sometimes running nose, sometimes stiffness. That's it. No pain, nothing. That is a painless swelling, non-cancerous in nature. They are benign in nature. So they may be asymptomatic when you talk about small nasal polyp. And if there is a moderate, like the polyp is grown in size, you may the patient will tell you that he's having running nose, or he may say there is stuffiness, there is some stuffiness, there is some blockage. There may be PND, which we call, there is post nasal drip, the mucus going inside, the post nasal drip may be there. And the irritation, there may be irritation, there may be swelling inside the nose, the lining of the passage may be swollen up, which may be lasting. If the cause is chronic sinusitis, nasal polyp, if the cause of nasal polyp is chronic sinusitis, then this irritation may last for around 12 weeks. So when you talk about nasal polyp, patient will come to you and say he is having loss of smell, or there is no sensation inside the nose. Sometimes the patient is even not aware of the polyp if the polyp is small. The patient may also complain of frequent nosebleeds if the polyp is severe. If the polyp is severe or obstructive in nature, this nosebleeds seen, frequent nosebleeds may be seen. And when you talk about this larger growth, so they may block the nasal passage, they may create breathing problems, breathlessness, dyspnea, loss of smell. They may not be able to they may not be able to sense smell. There may be frequent infections inside the nose. The sensation of taste may even be lost, because the whole anatomy and physiology of this nose is being of the face is being connected to each other. So there may be also loss of sense of taste when there is nasal polyp, obstructive type. And there may be facial pain. The patient may feel facial pain. Then the pain may radiate to the head, and the headache, there may be pain in head, headache may be seen, or there may be pain in the upper teeth if the nasal polyp is obstructive in nature. The patient having severe or even moderate sometimes, so they may also complain of snoring, that they snore during the sleep. Khanate maarte hain. They snore during the sleep. So there may be sensation of pressure over the forehead and the face. So these are the clinical features which a patient comes to you and tell you. They may complain of any feature, and you may suspect the cause as nasal polyp. So how do you diagnose this nasal polyp? Is you can use a otoscope or a nasoscope, which is a lighted instrument, and which we have seen this picture, that how you can see this. So how you can see this nasal polyp. Otherwise, you can go for endoscopy. The patient, if there is a polyp which is deeper inside the nose, and it is affecting the mucus, and the obstruction is severe, so you may go for nasal endoscopy. What they do is, in the nasal endoscopy, they throw the light, and they insert that there is a tube which is being inserted inside, and then they examine the location, the each and every aspect of nasal polyp. So endoscopy is one of the very good, you can say, this is actually a gold line investigation. So you can go for endoscopy, you can go for CT scan or MRI scan, which will actually tell you the exact size, the location of the polyp. Matlab, in fact, they can, if the polyp has deformed the bone, or whatever, there is deformation in the bone due to polyps, so that can even be detected by CT or MRI scan. So you can also go for some allergy tests if the patient is complaining of a history of any allergies, because we have seen one of the cause as allergy to dust, etc. So this will tell you what is the source of nasal inflammation, and there will the role of homeopathy come. When you know the etiology, when you know the cause of the disease, you can obviously cure the patient. You can go for PNS X-ray also, and X-ray lateral view of the nasopharynx can help to detect the nasal polyp, or histopathological examination. You can also see, we already studied that cystic fibrosis may be one of the cause, or some immune disorders, or some genetic disorders. So when you see young child with nasal polyp, you should go for genetic diseases, like cystic fibrosis, and you should investigate the same. See how this nasal polyp is being seen when you examine it with the otoscope or nasoscope. So see the picture how this nasal polyp is being formed. This is an obstructive type of nasal polyp which is being covering which is severely covering the nasal mucosa. And see, I've put some pictures wherein you can see clearly how this polyp is seen when you see the rhinoscopic view. When you see it through a rhinoscope, how you can see the polyp is being there. Septum is there, turbinates are there, the nasal turbinates are there, and you see the polyp location. This is the polyp location. So you can see the rhinoscopic view. When you talk about the left sagittal view, see how this middle turbinate area, which is being developing more polyp, and the inferior turbinate, the superior turbinate, and the polyp is formed in between. See the sinus, the ethmoidal sinus area, as well as the how it is seen through the left sagittal view. And you can clearly see the nasal polyp when you examine it through the left sagittal view. When you see it through endoscope, when you see through endoscope, see how it is being seen. You can see the middle turbinate where it is A, written is A, and when you see where you see B, the inside part, this is the nasal polyp which is being developing. So this is the view through endoscope, and you can see this polyp with nasal endoscopy, and normally it is seen as this nasal polyp. So this must be taken care, because this helps. This is to be diagnosis, and a correct diagnosis of a disease, the differential diagnosis will obviously help you out in your practice always. In every of my webinar, I say ki you should have the knowledge of medicine as well as the homeopathic knowledge, and you should diagnose the case first, and then only suspect its prognosis and everything, and then only commit to the patient. Because as a homeopath, if you have a knowledge of allied subjects more, then you will be better than an allopath, I would say. So because you will have a knowledge equal to the allopath as well as our homeopathic knowledge, so you will be a perfect homeopath when you talk about this allied subjects part. And then only you will be able to you can see the wonders. In fact, you can see our master, even Master Hahnemann was a allopath, and he had knowledge of each and every aspect of the body completely, and he is still the best homeopath. So he's the best. He became the best homeopath. So if you want to become a good homeopath, you should have the knowledge of allied part, each and every aspect of allied part. You should not ignore it. Don't think that just reading the materia medica and the symptoms, and then you will be able to cure the case. You will have this symptom, you will give this medicine, the patient will get cured. Yes, you may get good results because of it, but if you want to get results in all your cases, you should have the complete knowledge of each and every aspect of medical science. So you should note this thing, and you should manage the patient with homeopathic medicine, as well as you should know the general management of the patient. So you should tell the patient of a nasal polyp when he comes to you, that don't expose yourself to whatever allergies you have. If you are allergic to smoke, if you are allergic to dust, just take precautions, wear a mask, don't go in an area where there is more smoke or there are fumes, chemical fumes. The person needs to maintain good hygiene, because if he maintains good hygiene, he won't be getting exposed to many of the allergens and everything. He should humidify his home. He should be so that his breathing passages are clear and the mucus flow from his sinuses are fine. And he may also use a nasal rinse. He may use a saline spray or a nasal wash, so that he can rinse his nasal passages, so that his mucus flow is fine. So these are the general management, generally how the patients are being managed. So when you talk about what can a nasal polyp lead to, When the nasal polyp occur, a severe nasal polyp, or obstructive nasal polyp, it may also lead to sleep apnea. Obstructive sleep apnea. When the patient is sleeping, he may complain of stoppage of breathing, and then the breathing may start again. Or he may have asthma flare-ups. He may complain of sinusitis. He may complain of episodes of breathlessness, asthma, due to nasal polyp, because the breathing issue would be there. The one of the nose, if it's blocked, obviously the patient may come to you and say he's having breathlessness. And if the patient is having asthma or sinusitis, he may be prone to it more. So accordingly, you need to manage the case, or he may have more sinus infections. We have studied since so long about turbinates of the nose. When the turbinates hypertrophy, when the, we saw one mulberry hypertrophy seen in turbinates. So when you talk about this hypertrophy and nasal polyp, how to differentiate? The patient may come to you for hypertrophy also. That is the turbinate hypertrophy, or he may be having a nasal polyp. So you should differentiate between these two. Turbinates are usually normal structures, and nasal polyps are soft, painless growths. So you should differentiate between both of them, because turbinates help in heating and filtering the inhaled air. Whatever bad things we inhale with air, it will exclude out. The turbinates exclude out. So they are located bilaterally, and when you see nasal polyp, they're soft, painless growth, which may be seen on the mucous lining of the nose. So you must differentiate between whether it's a turbinate hypertrophy, whether it's a nasal polyp. See, now comes the main important part of this webinar, of this topic, that is the homeopathic aspect. So I have just down the few of the main remedies which I have usually experienced in my practice, what are beneficial for the whatever is beneficial for the nasal polyp. So we'll study we'll study like something interactive. So when there is obstruction of nose, patient comes to you, there is nose obstruction. Patient comes to you, he's not having any sense of smell, and he feels that there is some putrid, some bad smell in his nose, and the discharge is there, thick yellow discharge is there, and from the nose, and there is mucopurulent nasal discharges. So and he says these nasal polyps become bad in when there is rain or there is wet weather, and there are swollen turbinates also. So when all these symptoms come up to you, you may think about Lemna minor, which is a very good remedy for nasal polyp. This is a very good remedy which you can use in your practice when there is obstruction of nose, loss of smell. Then comes the very main remedy that is very much beneficial, and I have seen in my practice very good for nasal polyps, that is Teucrum marum. So when a patient comes to you, loss of smell is there, nasal blockage is there, obstruction is there on the side of the nose, whichever the patient lies down. See, when the patient is having the nasal polyp on the left side, and he lie down on the left side, and he feels that obstruction of that side. So yes, you can think of Teucrum marum. There may be crawling sensation, that something is crawling inside the nose. There may be ozena, which may be resulting in atrophy. So you may think of Teucrum when you see the patient nasal blockage, loss of smell, crawling sensation. So these are the marked features. Also, there is a very wonderful remedy, that is Agraphis nutus, that I have seen in two of the best cases. That is, one of the cases is autism patients, as well as I've seen them very useful for nasal polyps, as well as stammering also. It is a very good remedy. So when you talk about Agraphis nutans, nasal polyp, when they're obstructing the nostrils, there is enlargement of tonsils along with this nasal polyp. So you may think of Agraphis. When you see nasal polyp and tonsillitis together, which is the topic of today also, so you can think of Agraphis nutans. And there is a tendency to catch cold easily, and there is a free discharge which is coming from the mucous membrane. The nasal coryza is so much whenever there is cold season. A very good remedy which is being used by many of the homeopaths for ozena, for discharge, for many of the nasal complaints is ammonium carb, wherein there is discharge of watery discharge, the nose gets blocked at night, and there are snuffles of children, the patient cannot breathe through the nose, and there is epistaxis. If there is more obstruction, if there is severe obstruction and the patient is complaining of frequent nosebleeds, there is ozena, there is bloody mucus which is coming up from the nose, which is coming out from the nose, and the nose is being congested, the tip of the nose is congested, you can think of ammonium carb. When you talk about other remedy, that is cadmium sulf, which is again a good remedy for nasal polyp, wherein there is tightness, there is a feeling of tightness, that something tight is there, nose is obstructed, or there is caries inside the nasal bones. Caries occurs inside the nasal bones. There may be boil formation. See, this is such a good remedy for obstructive nasal polyp. When there are boils inside the nose, there are caries. The syphilitic nature is coming up of the body, the syphilitic characteristics, the ulceration is there inside the nostrils. One can think of cadmium sulf is a wonderful remedy which can be used. Sanguinaria, again, sanguinaria can be seen, especially when you talk about sanguinaria nitricum is a very good remedy which is being used for nasal polyp. So when there is a right-sided nasal polyp, patient comes to you for right-sided nasal polyp, there is watery discharge from the nose, burning is there. There is the plugged sensation as if a plug is inside the nose, which we have seen in many of the remedies. There is plug sensation, anacardium, etc. So there is, you can think about this remedy, this remedy sanguinaria nitricum especially. The turbinates of the nose are being enlarged. There is yellow bloody mucus from the nose. Kali nitricum again is a good remedy. That is for right-sided polyp only. Coryza is there, and nasal obstruction is there. Loss of smell, again, ammonium carb is also a very wonderful remedy for loss of smell. And Kali nitricum, maybe you can see that there is loss of smell, digging pain inside the nostrils. Again, a very wonderful remedy is calcarea carb, which is when the patient is complaining of left-sided nasal polyps. So when right-sided we have seen Kali nitricum and sanguinaria. Sanguinaria is a right-sided remedy. Headache is also right-sided and nasal polyp is also right-sided. Kali nitricum is also a very good remedy for right-sided polyp, nasal polyp. See, you can see there are, if you leave some exception of Kali group, mainly it is a right-sided remedy. So you can go for Kali nitricum. Also, Merck is also there, which is a very good remedy for right-sided nasal polyp, though it's having syphilitic characteristics more. But yes, it's a very good remedy for nasal polyp again. So calcarea carb is for left-sided nasal polyp. When there is blocked nose on the left side, there is fetid smell inside the nose. The discharge is having fetid smell, and there is dryness inside the nose, especially when you talk about morning. The patient will come that he's having sneezing. छींके आ रही है उसको, sneezing हो रही है. Usually in the morning time there is dryness inside the nose, that and the whole day there is yellow discharge. So there is tendency to catch cold easily. There is sudden change, like if he goes inside the AC or whatever it is. So you can think of calcarea carb in such a case. Another good remedy, which is a very commonly used remedy, is Allium cepa, where there is constant sneezing, watery discharge, headache, sensation of lump inside at the root of the nose, there is stoppage of the nose. So you can think of Allium cepa, which is again a very good remedy and is being compared to euphrasia again for when there is nasal discharge and there is lacrimation also. So you can go for Allium cepa and euphrasia also. Kali bai is also a very good remedy when there is hawking, there is PND. See, Kali bai and Kali carb are wonderful remedies when you talk about PND, that is post-nasal discharge. When the post-nasal discharge is so much thick, ropey in nature, and there is hawking, hawking is there is marked pressure at the root of the nose, there is fetid smell, there is violent sneezing, sinusitis may be there, history of sinusitis, so you can go for Kali bai. Phosphorus is also a wonderful remedy, Calcarea phos as well as phosphorus. When you talk about coryza, headache is there, blocked nose is there, obstructive type of nasal polyp, you can think of phosphorus. There is coryza, there is dryness of the nose, and there is alternate the dryness of the nose. One at once the left side is affected, and on the other at the other time the right sided may be effective. And this the feature which is being seen marked is that they become worse after stronger dose, because the patient of phosphorus, when you talk, they have burning, they're very much oversensitive. Phosphorus patients are oversensitive to each and everything, like Nux vomica. So when you talk about strong odors, whenever they come in contact with strong odors, they may become worse. When you talk about Hepar sulf, again a very good remedy. Hepar sulf is a very commonly used remedy for polyps or nasal complaints where there is soreness of nostrils, sneezing, stopped up nose. Whenever he goes into the cold air, there is a cold air aggravation, sneezing is there, thick offensive discharge is there. Another clinical tip I want to give, which I have seen very good in many of the used by many of the doctors, that is Geranium maculatum is a very good mother tincture which is being used for nasal polyps. Wherever there is nasal polyp or the severe type of nasal polyps are also being seen in practice in many of the doctors, that Geranium maculatum mother tincture can be used. So when you talk, there we come to the end part of that nasal polyp. What are the rubrics which you can consider for nasal polyps, or wherever you find that polyps may be seen, or the common remedies which are being seen as nasal polyps? There are direct rubrics which is being given in the complete repertory, in the synthesis repertory, in the Kent's repertory under nose chapter. Polyp, particularly nasal, post-nasal, nasal. If you see about Kent repertory, the nose, in the chapter of nose, polyp is given. There are 34 medicines which are being given. The right-sided polyp, there is Kali nitricum, which we studied recently, and the left-sided polyp, you can use Calcarea carb, Merck, Apis, Merck iodus rubras. Merck iodus rubras is a exceptional remedy of mercury, which is useful in left-sided tonsillitis, left-sided nasal polyps, and all other remedies of mercury are usually right-sided. So there are always exception in the group. When you talk about left-sided, Dr. Kent has mentioned that Merck iodatus rubra is for left-sided nasal polyp, which is bleeding easily. There is bleeding from the nasal polyp. You can use Calcarea phosphorus, thuja, which have hemorrhagic tendency. And posterior nares PND, for PND you can use Teucrum. When you talk about this BBCR, maybe there is in the nose chapter, polypy is given, hypertrophy is given. See, so wonderful remedies are given in this. Aurum muraticum, belladonna, cadmium sulf is there, Kali nitricum, Kali bi is there, sanguinaria is there, staph is there, thuja is there. So you can see this. When you talk about boric repertory, again, boric repertory has nose eruption growths, and inside that you have polypy subrubric, and you can see cadmium sulf, formica rufa, conium maculatum. When there is conium is also a very good remedy for psychotic things, whatever growths are coming up in the body. Though when you talk about conium, the character of that growths, usually conium is a very good remedy for cancerous growths, even scrofulous tendencies. So when you talk about the stony hardness, so there is stony hardness in conium patients. So just see the totality of the case and then only go for the remedy. So when you talk about lemna minor, nitric acid, phosphorus, thuja, vaithia, there are so many medicines given. Clark has also mentioned thuja, formica, calcarea, teucrum, nitric acid for polyp of nose. And Dr. E.B. Nash has also mentioned thuja, calcarea for polyp inside the nose. Nar repertory also mentions Hecla lava, where there is obstructing nostrils. There is the Hecla lava is a wonderful remedy, which is when the mastication, when the swallowing is being affected due to polyp. So one can think of Hecla lava, bleeding tendency, phosphorus is there. Left side nasal polyp, alumina is there. Sanguinaria is very good remedy. Teucrum is relevant. Dr. Nar has also mentioned in his repertory. So when you talk about repertorization, I just listed a case, a normal sample case for you. If you can choose the rubrics like polyp, you can choose polyp. Loss of smell is there. With loss of smell, polyp is there. Stiff sensation, stuffiness is there. Or the patient is complaining of coryza, PND, post nasal drip is there. There is swelling inside the body. See how wonderfully these remedies are coming. Calcarea is there, Kali Bai is there, which we studied. Phosphorus is there. Aurum metallicum is there. CPI is also a wonderful remedy. Sanguinaria nitricum is coming. Hydrastis is also coming because hydrastis is a very good remedy for PND and discharge thick mucus in strings. Lycopodium is there. Teucrum is there. Surinum you can use. So it all depends on the case. It all depends on your on the totality of the symptoms which you get in a case, the characteristic symptoms, the uncommon peculiar symptoms of each and every case which comes to you, which you have to take during repertorization, and that through that knowledge you should go for that treatment, and then you can cure the case. So homeopathy initially controls the symptoms of nasal polyps, and with time, when the patient is continuing treatment with trust, they start to shrink in size and dissolve. So this is what I want to say, that homeopathy can initially control the symptoms for nasal polyps and shrink. You can shrink the size. So thank you everyone. Thank you the team of IHMA and Homeopathy 360 for giving me the opportunity. So I hand over the session to Dr. Deepu or ma'am. I'm just stop sharing. So you can, Dr. Anupriya, you with us?
Yes, doctor. It was such a nice session, doctor. And doctor, I have many requests from the participants. Can we take a question and answer session in the last? So we have both the experts at the same time, and people will be more benefited, I think. So what you say, doctor? You like to take at that time or in the last, for the 10 to 15 minutes?
We can discuss in the end. We can discuss in the end along with Dr. Deepu.
Yeah, thank you so much, doctor. And thanks a lot. I just want to say a few words for you. Many times we characterize homeopathy only with symptom constitutions and miasms, as you put in the lecture. But we have to be more focused on the surgical cases also. It's beyond the homeopathy. It's a diversity of a homeopathy. So thank you so much, doctor, for you focused on this topic, and it was such a outstanding presentation. And hope everybody enjoyed it, and thank you so much for your collaboration with Homeopathy 360, and well wishes for the further session. And from IHMA family, I show my sincere gratitude. Thank you so much. Dr. Deepu,
Yeah.
are you?
So can I take? So Dr. Yeshika have done an excellent job. So I have to
Yeah. As always.
forward with that.
Always
As
no.
always, she is too good. So can we start or wait?
Yeah. But we have some introduction part. As everybody knows you, I know that, but it's a IHMA procedure we have to go through. So today as a speaker, we have Dr. Deepu CS, as everybody is familiar with him. He's a big face, Dr. Deepu. His BHMS from DPM, DPM HMC. Dr. Deepu have plus 6 years of clinical experience, and he running his clinic well. A master of acute cases, no doubt. Dr. Deepu from IHMA. He's IHMA secretary, and he running the web series from last 8 years. a well-experienced man in all the medical association, and a young talent, mentor of all the time. So from IEHMA family, it's a great pleasure to have you, doctor, and no needs for further introduction. You are the big personality
Hello.
and a leading hand. Start the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anupriya, and thank you, Yeshika. So before we start, I would like to thank few people, and it's a great privilege for me and a responsibility for me to take a session in this Hope series. And it's only because of Yeshika who compelled me to take a session even in the last season. So, and to be frank, I am not a great speaker. I have very little bit of experience in my hand. And with that experience, I would like to share few of my knowledge with you. So I'm sharing the screen, and in between, if any call come, my phone will be cutting off. So kindly inform me, Dr. Anupriya. Okay.
Yes, doctor, no problem. You can start.
So is my screen is visible?
Yeah, it's better.
So good afternoon, friends. Today I'm going to talk about tonsillitis. So as the name suggests, it's a homeopathy, a non-surgical aid to tonsillitis. In my presentation, I am focusing on to how can we devoid of this tonsillitis and tonsillectomy. So before we start, I should thank few people. So first of all, I am saluting my master, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. Uh, Without him, we can't do anything in homeopathy because he was the one who started homeopathy, and it's been we are facing so many criticisms, even though we are doing our well with the Hahnemannian principle. So I salute Dr. Samuel Hahnemann and all teachers of my college who taught me, and I'm very thankful and I express my sincere gratitude to all of them. And of course, I haven't added something because I don't have a laptop with me. So my friend prepared me the slides. And I'm really thankful to IHME and my friends in my clinic, Dr. Amir, Dr. Halim, Dr. Nias, and all the colleagues of my class. I'm really thankful all of them.
Hello, doctor.
All of them.
Doctor, sorry for the interruption, but something is disturbing, like, something net problem. I think something disturbing, like with the audio only.
Okay now? Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's okay, but that is something, what I say, some sounds coming
Okay,
from
fine.
the background.
Right now, how is it?
The sound is so
Is it
okay.
better now?
Yeah, it's okay, but some
Okay.
back disturbance is coming. You just check whether your handset is hand handset is well placed or not.
Is it okay now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Is it okay now? I remove my headset.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
okay, fine. So before starting the session, let us discuss regarding this tonsillectomy. So what happens in your body when tonsillectomy done? As you know, it is a surgical procedure. So my aim in this presentation is how can we get rid of this? So let's see what happens. For that, we need to understand what are the functions of these tonsils. So what are the functions? It acts as a protective role and as a sentinels at the portal of air and food passage. And also it important part in the body's immune system and vital defense organ, which helps us fight with bacteria and viruses. As Yeshika told the nasal mucosa and its functions. So when tonsillectomy is done, these all functions will be disturbed and the body's immune reaction will be lessened. So we are prone to more infections. So let's go through the anatomy first. So as you know, these tonsils are part of Wadler's lymphatic ring. Generally, when generally we are only talking about this palatine tonsils. So in this picture, you can see this is the palatine tonsils. It is 2 in number. Then there is lingual tonsil. There is adenoid. Then there is lingual tonsil, tubal tonsil, and adenoid. All these forms the valvates lymphatically. So in this picture also you can see the lymphatic drainage of this valvulate ring, which is very important, not for the homeopathy part, but it's important that the infection can goes to the retropharyngeal node, jugulodigastric node, the surrounding nodes. In this, these two nodes are very important. So moving ahead, let's discuss something regarding this palatine tonsil. So palatine tonsils are 2 in number. Each tonsil is an ovoid mass of lymphoid tissue situated in the lateral wall of oropharynx between the anterior and posterior pillars. In this picture, you can see the anterior pillar and the posterior pillar. And you can see the medial surface here and the lateral surface here, and it has 2 borders and upper and lower port, just for the information. So in this picture, you can see how these tonsils are connected in the tonsillar bed. So in this, you can see this is the medial side of the tonsil and this is the lateral side. So in this lateral side, it is separated by the bed of the tonsil that is formed by the superior constrictor by a capsule. Between this superior constrictor and this bed of the tonsil and this capsule, there is a loose area or tissue. There is, it is a area where we can see the peritonsillar abscess termed as Kinsey. So moving to the medial side, in this picture, you can see the medial surface of the tonsil is covered by non-keratinizing stratified squamous epithelium, which dips into the substance of tonsils to form the crypts. As you see, these are the scripts, which are, you can see multiple scripts. This can be divided into primary and secondary crypts. And you also can see the stratified squamous epithelium. And you can also see the lymphatic nodules, which contain the B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. I'm not going to the immunity part, but you should know that are the main thing which is functioning for the tonsils. So there are around about 12 to 15 crypts, out of which one large crypt is there. It is called termed as crypta magna. Okay. So let's move to it is the same picture. You can see the blood supply. You can see the submandibular salivary gland, the angle of mandible. Everything can be seen in this picture. So let's come to the arterial supply of the tonsils. So the tonsil is supplied by 5 arteries. You can see from the picture the tonsillar branch of facial artery. Then there is an ascending palatine branch of facial artery, dorsal lingual branches of this lingual artery, ascending pharyngeal branch of external carotid artery, greater palatine branch of maxillary artery. It is because of this that the tonsillectomy is very complicated because so much supply is there. So as you know, I have told you regarding a capsule between this peritonsillar in the peritonsillar space, because through this capsule we are doing this tonsillectomy. But in doing so, because of this high rich supply of blood supply, there can be chances of bleeding. And I have an experience. My senior told me that it is very complicated surgery. It can be either a very complicated one. And regarding the lymphatic drain, the lymphatics from the tonsil pierce the superior constrictor and drain into the upper deep cervical nodes, particularly to the jugulodigastric node situated below the angle of mandible. So we know that the angle of mandible, when some patient will come to our clinic, we can easily identify the we can easily palpate the jugulodigastric node. It is commonly inflamed and tender. In chronic tonsillitis, it is more tender, which I will tell later on. Then it is supplied by the glossopharyngeal and lesser palatine nerves, which is also important because sometimes the patient may comes with the acute ear pain. So it can be sometimes a referred pain through the glossopharyngeal nerve. And as you know, it is draining into paratonsillar vein. It's a part of facial vein. So coming to our topic, so this is the basic anatomy of the tonsil, which we should understand. What are the structures, the arterial venous supply. So let's move to the topic proper. In this presentation, I'm not going to do a detail of anything, just a glimpses of what I know. So tonsillitis is simply the inflammation of tonsils. So in tonsillitis, you see, in this picture, you can see the difference between both the tonsils. Okay. So in the normal way, we can see the oral mucosa very clearly. It is very pinkish in color. But in abnormal, when the tonsillitis happens, you can see the redness is there. The upper part of the mucosa also be swollen, and there are redness and swollen tonsils are there. Then regarding the etiology, it can be applied in as well chronic as well as this acute tonsillitis. So the etiology it can caused by two bacteria and viral. So we can simply differentiate this in the later on slides. So the bacteria which are normally seen in the in producing this tonsillitis are Haemolytis, Streptococcus, that is Streptococcus pyogenes especially, and Streptococcus pneumococci and Staphylococci can also cause this inflammation. And also in virals, there are adenovirus, EB virus, and corona. You know, we are already facing the corona pandemic. It can also affect these tonsils because of its rich content of B and T cells. And you can see it is often seen in school-going children because in the childhood only that lymphatics are normal. The immune system is developing. So normally the lymphatics, the tonsils are inflamed in the childhood. In my early days of practice, I used to see that the children with around 5 to 6 age always having these tonsils. So the patient's mother frequently told me that it is not reducing. But you know, in some cases, it will reduce only after the 13 years of age, and we can reduce the sufferings. So these are the triggering factors, as you know. Cold food can cause this, and weather, pollution, sour foods like orange, grape, then artificial colored food and tooth decay even can be a cause of this tonsillitis. So when we come to the tonsillitis, you can see these crypts. In this crypt, the crypts are made to tap it usually contains the food debris. It can catch bacteria and there. So in tonsillitis, there can be tonsillar edema and hypertrophy, and erythema and redness and pain. That can be the symptom. So in tonsillitis, we can see all these signs in the tonsil. We can say the edema, hypertrophy, erythema, that is redness, and pain. The inflammation may affect other areas of the throat, including the adenoids and lingual tonsils. The inflammatory process produces exudate either in the form of yellow, gray, or white. That we will see in the future slides, the upcoming slides. So that is regarding this acute tonsillitis. So what are the types? That's very important. Even in the homeopathy practice, it is very important. So we have 4 types of tonsillitis: acute parenchymatous tonsillitis, acute membranous tonsillitis, acute follicular tonsillitis, and acute catarrhal or superficial tonsillitis. So in this acute catarrhal superficial tonsillitis, you can see only there is swelling, but for that the whole oral mucosa is swollen. So the generalized pharyngitis is mostly seen in this. Okay, that is a major difference. In acute follicular tonsillitis, the infection spread into the crypts, which become filled with purulent material presenting at the open crypts as yellow spots. You can see the spots in acute follicular tonsillitis and even in chronic follicular tonsillitis. So this is the most severe variety where we can see the congestion there, but you know these two tonsils come in meeting in the midline. This can happen with this acute parenchymatous tonsillitis, and in this case we will see the typical symptoms of swallowing difficulty, the respiratory difficulty, even cough can be there. Then acute membranous tonsillitis. It is also an extension of acute follicular tonsillitis when this exudation from the crypts collates to form a membrane. We can easily remove this through a swab. In this follicular tonsillitis, I have to say something because it is most commonly caused by the streptococcal bacteria. So it can be known as either strep throat. And also this tonsillitis is always accompanied by pharyngitis. It can be termed as acute tonsillopharyngitis. So in this photo, we can easily identify the differentiating point between the acute bacterial and viral tonsillitis. In viral tonsillitis, there can be redness, swollen, and the throat redness will be there. In bacterial tonsillitis, we can also see some the pus cells are we can clearly seen in the tonsils, and also there can be coated tongue can be seen in the tonsils. So coming to the common symptoms of tonsillitis, that is sore throat, difficulty in swallowing, fever can be there. Mostly the chill and rigor I used to see in my practice. There can be earache, like the acute ASOM can be seen. Then there are constitutional symptoms like headache, malaise can be seen. So what are the signs of tonsillitis? There can be fetid breath because of the pus formation. There can be coated tongue, then hyperemia of pillars of soft palate and uvula, jugulodigastric lymph node enlargement. We can palpate that, and excessive salivation. So that is all regarding the acute tonsillitis. So before going to the chronic tonsillitis, we should know we have four varieties: acute follicular, acute membranous, acute superficial, and acute parenchymatous tonsillitis. So what do you mean by this chronic tonsillitis? I can't see the chat box, but I will say in chronic tonsillitis, a sore throat present at least for 3 months with persistent inflammation of jugulogastric lymph nodes and sore throat. It can be persist for almost 3 months. So we can also say that recurrent tonsillitis. But in recurrent tonsillitis, we can see that in between the attack, there won't be much symptoms. But in chronic tonsillitis, there is a fixed symptom, there is a persistent symptom. And it can happen as a complication of acute tonsillitis. There are three types: chronic follicular, chronic fibroid, and chronic parenchymatous. So in chronic follicular tonsillitis, we can see like the acute tonsillitis, there can be seen the crypts are full of infected material. The yellow spots are seen, but it is much severe here. In chronic fibroid tonsils, you can see the tonsils are small, but there can be repeated attack of sore throat. In chronic parenchymatous tonsillitis, that is the most important one, because in this condition, there is hyperplasia of lymphoid tissue, and it interferes with the speech, deglutition, and respiration. It is the most common, it is the most dangerous, or which is where allopaths are trying for tonsillectomy is this condition. And in long-standing cases, it can cause even cor pulmonale because of the obstruction. So we can three type of chronic tonsillitis are there. So let's move to the clinical features. As you see, there is recurrence will be there. There will be cough. There will be pus formation. Pus formation will be there. Then thick speech, difficulty in swallowing, choking spells at night, and enlargement of jugulodigastric lymph node. So now we know what is chronic tonsillitis, acute, recurrent, and the basics of tonsils. So what can tonsillitis lead to? So as I told you, the peritonsillar space is filled with infection. It can cause quinsy. Apart from that, it can also lead to acute otitis media. Though this is also another complication, parapharyngeal abscess. It occurs in the parapharyngeal space. It is also a very serious condition. So these are the three complications of major three main. There are many complications, but these are the three main causes of these tonsillitis. That is tonsilloid. It is nothing but a calcified material at the tonsils. In intratonsillar abscess, you can see in the pus formation happens in the capsule of tonsils. So tonsillar cyst is a rare condition. It is not used to see in every cases. It is very low. Its prevalence is very low. So what are the investigations of tonsillitis? So we know that there is viral infections are there, bacterial infections are there. So in blood count, what will be the blood count? In viral infection, there will be lymphocytosis, and the platelet count will be low, thrombocytopenia. And also to identify the organism, because in this I haven't mentioned the virus. Virus can also cause this Epstein-Barr virus can cause infective mononucleosis. which is a serious disease, which can either affect this the liver or sometimes spleen. So it is very important that we should do the swab test also can be done to differentiate the which kind of bacteria. And also with this rapid strep test is used to diagnose the strep throat that is caused by the Streptococcus pyogenes. And also with this Streptococcal pyogenes, you know that it can cause this rheumatic fever as well as this glomerulonephritis because of the antigen reaction. And also the exudate can also cause either scarlet fever. So how we diagnose the tonsillitis in our clinic? So we can directly examine the clinic and we can do the tongue depressor to see the tonsils. And based on the symptoms and signs, we can know or we should know what kind of tonsil we are facing with. Then the lymph node examination is very big. Sometimes the patient may comes with simply the fever, When after giving this ferrum-phos, in some cases the fever won't subside. In that case, when I look for the tonsils, it can be most of the time it will be this swollen. So it can be differentiated from some other conditions like diphtheria. It is caused by Corynebacterian diphtheria, Vincent angina. It is caused by some fusiform spirochetes. Then infective mononucleosis, granulocytosis, aphthous ulcers. Aphthous ulcers can also cause these tonsils, so that can also be differentiated. So malignancy can be there because of its lymphoid nature. Then traumatic ulcers, like this surgery, like that, the tooth extraction. So this is called Vincent angina. You might be knowing that it is a very serious condition. There is sloughing of tissues there. This is infective mononucleosis, and this is aphthous ulcer of tonsils. So we just completed what are the tonsillitis, acute tonsillitis, chronic tonsillitis, and what are the complications, how to examine and all. So let's move to the conventional treatment. My cousins are all cousins, many cousins I have in allopathy. So when in my childhood days, when I go to them, they used to give me analgesics and this antimicrobial therapy like penicillin. I think I have taken so many injections. So my primary aim is for the local pain. That is their most important aim in treating the case. They will say that it is symptomatic treatment like that, but they won't support us. So let's move to the homeopathic concept. So before going to the homeopathic concept, I would like to tell you that this is just I haven't made my enough slides. I will just give you a glimpses of ideas only. So how homeopathic case taking is different from allopathic case taking, as well as in acute and chronic, that we should know. So in aforesaid number 3, Hahnemann had told us that to know the disease, then only we have to treat. So the knowledge of disease we should know, that we have discussed right now. So right now we need how to adopt it to the principles and how to administer drug according to its mode of action. So in acute case taking, I used to take the presenting complaints with its location, sensation, concomitant and modalities. In chronic case taking only, I go for this full case taking. Because in chronic case taking, even if it is coming with an acute presentation, then I will go with the acute totality. Then after that, I used to go for chronic prescription. So regarding this miasm, I might say there are various miasms by different masters. So sticking on to the Hahnemann, I will say the non-venereal diseases are all originated from Sora. The venereal diseases are psychosis and syphilis. So I just wanted to point out this thing that I just considered this miasm as Sora only, so that we can, I will tell more about that later. Then we are considering to give a homeopathic remedy, we should know the totality of symptoms, not a single symptom we can take. Like this swelling of tonsil, we can give a medicine. We have many medicines like that, but we should know what kind of swelling that is. And that is why we should administer the similimum. So the similimum concept, which you all know, the constitutional concept, how we can know, how we can do that, we will see. So these are some of the prescriptions which I'm using in my clinic. That is etiological prescription, then keynote prescriptions are there, constitutional, then PQRS, onset of prescriptions, intercurrents. So all my friends, I am requesting you to take the case and find out the remedy. In acute disease, I used to take the presenting complaints and history of presenting complaints. In chronic case taking, only I take the whole picture. So in acute, so we are going to the different kinds of prescription. So the based on the etiology, we can simply, I have just mentioned some rubrics in this. Actually, you know, the triggering factors like this cold weather can cause this tonsillitis. So we can take that rubric for such kind of cases. We have remedies like Bryonia, Restox, Belladonna, Aconite, like that we can give. Then wet weather aggravation there is there. Then wet cold weather, dry weather, like that. So many causations are there. We can give prescriptions on basis of this etiology when it is prominent. In every case, I used to take the context as well as the intensity. So if the intensity is more, then I will more focus on the pathology. If the intensity is not that much high, then I will go for the different ways of prescriptions. So regarding the location, that's an important. Actually, Dr. Yeshika had mentioned regarding this Mercaid rubber. Actually, Mercaid rubber is a very, very nice remedy that I have been using for last 5 years. I got this tip from my one of the seminars. So this location is very important. So Mercaid rubrum, when this patient comes up with Merxol-like symptoms, as you know, I forgot to mention the symptom. One symptom that is excessive salivation. So Merxol, you know, you can it will cover the change of weather. It will cover the yellow exudate will be there, and there is also the etiology, the pathology can be covered by Merxol. But when it is affect the right side, the left side alone, the whole left side, even the jugulo-digastric node even the cervical node sometimes can be swollen. That kind of case, I used to prescribe Mercaid rubrum in 30. That will be in. I used to give in some cases I used to give half dram, the 3 pills 3 times a day. And in EPIS, I can see in some cases when the EPIS can be given on the basis of this location, and also some other symptoms are there. The ula will be swollen like a glass, and also there will be a specific modality will be there. And also the side affinity. Some tonsillitis begin in the left side to right and right side to left. That you can see in the rubric part, that you can see in the repertory. I haven't included in this, that in my presentation. You can go to the throat pain side, this right to left to right, that can that. So latcaninum is also a remedy that I used to prescribe when the shifting is from right to left to right, like that. So regarding the sensation, we can give some medicines based on the sensation. When the sensation is prominent, we can give the medicines like nitric acid, like stinging, the spindle-like pain. I used to have patients like talking exactly like this. And also the mucosa will be, you might be knowing the affection of sphere of action of nitric acid. The mucosa will be ulcerated. Then HEPA is a, you know, when I begin my practice, I only know the 3 remedies: Merxol, Hepasulf, and Silesia. That are the 3 remedies which I use to prescribe for every patient. But when this sensation is there, the HEPA works very beautifully like a fishbone or plug in the throat. Also look for the constitutional general symptoms. Then arginine sensation of a splinter in throat. I just giving an idea how to take the PQRS in a case. Then the modalities. We can see so many medicines, like liquids are more painful than solids when swallowing, like that. There are so many symptoms, other symptoms, but we can see sometimes these symptoms alone will be present in the case. In Baptisia can swallow liquids only. Like that in Phytolacca, there is only liquids are painful. So in Epis and Silesia, they need cold water for the better. For getting better, they need like cold water. But in Arsar Glycopodium, they need the warm water. So in Causticum also relieved by cold water, you can see in the Metrium Medica. When in concomitants, you know, I just mentioned only one drug, the painlessness I have seen. And also I prescribe opium for some cases when the patient comes with high fever. There will be not much symptoms will be there. The patient will be coming and he will be much energetic. Even in children, that children comes with even with 104, they won't be showing much weakness and also no pain. In that case, opium also helped me. As you know, these 3 drugs, this Belladonna, Aconite, and Restox. I already told you the sudden onset, like this cold wind, The belladonna throat, you might be knowing the red swelling, like that. The pain will be appearing suddenly. Then these three remedies I will mention, because in many cases, when even after giving the constitutional med prescription, I used to, the patient will come up again, coming up with the same complaint, but with much lesser intensity. In that kind of case, we can consider tuberculinum 1M and bacillinum 1M. So it is I used to give it in 1 month or between 1 month or 2 months after giving the constitutional medicine. And streptococcinum is an excellent drug in preventing the recurrences. Also, some more drug I would like to ask. There are pyrogen is there. It is also very good remedy. Then sorinum, then medorinum. All these remedies are very, very important. Then the constitutional approach, which when you in chronic case taking, when you get the picture, I will say you should take the picture in between the periods. That is, you should not prescribe for the acute symptoms. You should look for the constitutional symptoms. Like when you are going to prescribe sulfur, there will have to be the sulfur element or the sulfur symptoms, like this burning, the mental, physical, everything has to be matched. And in this drugs, there are two drugs which are very effective in tonsillitis, as well as in like Dr. Yeshika told, this nasal polyp. That is calcarea carb and Barita-carb. Very, very important drug to reduce the tonsillar hypertrophy. Even the hypertrophy tonsil, these both drugs are active very beautifully. And regarding this Tuja, I forgot to mention, when you are giving to an etiological prescription, in most of the time when I used to prescribe for children, there has been a constant history of this vaccination. So the vaccination history, when the complaints are recurring, you can give this Tuja as well as Merxol. So these are some kind of mother things which my friend Dr. Sanal used to prescribe, and we have a software and we are doing it. So in some cases they used to give 5 drops, and in phytolacca are an excellent remedy in using in mother tinctures. But I don't frequently recommend that. In severe cases, when there is loss of sleep, aphonia will be there. I used to prescribe this. And Vaidya is also another good remedy. You can find indication in the keynote. And Elandis, as you know, it is also it is indicated for adenoids as well as this tonsillitis. So these are my clinical observation, because I used to attend tonsillitis cases in every month. I think everybody will be like that. So these drugs, which I am used as a tip for my clinical practice, because with this drug I can almost cure about 50 to 60% of my cases. It can be, the acute episode can be cured by this. That is, I told you the Mercide rubor, which is on the left side, and Mercide flavors, it's on the right side. So this drug, based on the mercurial symptoms, which can be an effective. Like if there is ear affection too, I used to prescribe Mercdalsys. And there are, Merxol is also an excellent remedy when there is salivation, there is fetid breath, that will be the Merxol indication. But with that, this right-sided will be there, then it is excellent. Then Barita, in stubborn cases, when this, as we seen in the pharyngeal tonsillitis, the tonsils are coming closer. In that kind of cases, Barita-carb, when given, when not getting results, I used to give Barita-iod. That too in the 30 potency. Some of my friends told me that even it is better in the 6x potency also. And calcarea iodide is very excellent remedy in calcarea subjects. That I will say. In thyroid cases also, I am getting from excellent results. And in some case of tonsillitis, the patient may feel the pain in the abdomen due to the lymph node enlargement. So in that, I had a case of this mesenteric lymphadenitis where I use the patient once comes with this tonsillitis. I used to prescribe calcarea carb. But later on, I just come to know that he also suffered from the tonsillitis in the childhood. I used to give calcarea. So these 4 drugs are very effective. And also, I will add that all calcareas are too good. Even the calcarea fluor is very excellent in when there is no pus. So when there is no pus, we can think of Barita and calcarea iron, and that will be much more indicated in viral tonsillitis. So these are some important rubrics for elimination. See, as I told you when the beginning part, the miasm. So, you know, when we are treating the symptoms, we should not only focus on the symptoms. We should also know the state of the tonsil. So we can just simply take these rubrics as an elimination. I'm just following the tablet super protocol by Dr. Srividya. In that also, in that method, we used to take the tonsils. So we will look for the repertoire universal, and in that throat, we can directly go to the side, we can go to the tonsils location, and we can also give the process that going in the tonsil. So we can simply take this when there is inflammation of the pharyngitis and inflammation of the tonsils are there, we can take tonsil inflammation of tonsils. And when there is swelling of tonsils are there, even without these subclinical cases, there will be little bit swelling will be there. No redness will be there. We can take this swelling and we can take suppuration of tonsil, and we can also take the induration of tonsil. When there is chronic pharyngeal tonsillitis, we can take this rubric as an elimination. But this is taken from this mobile phone. So there are much remedies in that, in the repertory. You can, if there is no remedies in that, we can also directly go to the general chapter where we can see the abscess can be taken coupled with this tonsils suppuration, tonsils inflammation, and tonsil uh, swelling. So this can be taken instead of we are just going through this miasm, we can take this rubric as an elimination. So these are the some rubrics which I got from the Murphy repertory. Then throat infection, tonsils infection of, then chronic and recurrent. So the recurrent tonsillitis, this rubric is very useful. Then you can see the causation, cold weather, and sometimes the throat pain can be extended to some areas, either to neck. That kind of cases, we can simply the location sensation concomitant, we can add extension to. Then there is short swallowing, general difficult, drink in order to swallow. Those who wanted to take the screenshot can take this. It is very useful in my practice actually. And liquids are, and in most of the cases there is some confusion in the early stage. In the early stage of my practice, I used to confused with the disease symptoms. But I will tell you, friends, in acute tonsillitis, common symptoms are most helpful. With that common symptom, we can identify the peculiarity. That is the art in homeopathy. The throat pain, tonsils, mouth salivation in general, throat enlargement of tonsils. So these are the common rubrics, and we will take the case. Then we can differentiate the tonsillitis. We differentiated the rubric. Then we come to the common remedies. So this I only taken the boric picture. So in this epic, you can see the uvula is swollen, and there can be fish bone in the throat, and also there is cold amelioration will be there. And in aconite, there is redness, dry constricted that can be indicated in acute pharyngeal tonsillitis mostly. So in baptisia, there is dark redness of tonsils and soft palate, and even in baptisia, it can be indicated in chronic pharyngeal tonsillitis because there is much difficulty in swallowing, and also there is sleep apnea will be there, and that kind of pathology always matching. When it is coupled with the general symptoms and mind, it can be given. So there is belladonna, baryta carp, there is bromium, baryta ad. Then calcarea carb is an excellent remedy. Then calcarea sulf. Ignatia is another important remedy, a great remedy of contradictions. Then Calimore is there. You can see the tonsils. I'm not going to the details of these drugs. You can do study your Metrium Medica. Then there is Merck Sol, Mercide flavors. You can see in keynote as Merck Protoiodide. Then there is Phytolacca. Then Sorinum. And also for this quinsy, we have lots of remedies even in our keynote, like Baryta carb, Sorinum. And also to Streptococcinum, I will add there we have nosodes like Staphylococcinum and Pneumococcinum. So now after giving the homeopathy part, we should do all the diet. We should tell our patients regarding the diet and nutrition. So the foods to avoid are avoid juices which contain high amount of acids like grape, lemonade, orange juice, etc. Then avoid cola, caffeine containing products such as coffee. Avoid hard food which irritate the throat. We should relax the throat actually. The foods to include are to soothe your throat, intake of fluids like lukewarm water that we used to tell them. Then soft palatable foods like rice, yogurt and pudding should be taken. Soups containing vegetables and soft meat can be considered. Then do's and don'ts. So the water gargling is very much effective, and you should advise a patient to take plenty of fluids and rest. Then, like you, Corona, you should wash your hands with soap and cover your mouth and clean your house. That is like a slogan now. And don't avoid oily and fried foods, avoid cold food and drinks, avoid close contact with infected persons, and please avoid self-medication and overexertion. So with this, I would like to summarize my presentation. So role of homeopathy in tonsillitis. So we can reduce the inflammation and enlarge tonsil back to normal. There is no say like that syphilis to psychosis, psychosis to SORA. Our ultimate aim is to give relief to the patient. So we can reduce the patient in chronic prescription. Don't think that we will cure the case in one prescription. We will need another remedy to complement that. And mostly the calcarea or either polycrest will be the final choice. Then it utilizes minute doses of remedies. We don't give much remedies like in allopathy, and it enhances the natural immunity. As we know, we have studies now going on in Kerala for this Corona time. We know that our cells our medicines produce natural, enhance the natural immunity, not the specific antigen mediated immunity, but there is an action in that reduces the susceptibility to common infection. We know that by making the tonsils perfectly working, we can reduce the susceptibility to common infection. And we can enhance the level of health and prevent recurrence of tonsillitis and reducing the intensity, frequency, and duration. That is most important. In chronic tonsillitis, if it is coming in 3 attacks in 1 month, then it will be reducing 2 attacks. Then like that, it will be reducing. Then protective shield and save the tonsil from the knife and scalpel. So I would like to conclude my session by saying this: sooner we begin the homeopathic treatment, better will be the outcome. Thank you all for patiently listening to me. I am having a very limited knowledge of homeopathy and this disease, but I explained in my way of talk. If you having any doubts, you can ask now.
Thank you so much, Doctor. It was such a beautiful session, no doubt. So participants, if you have any doubts, you can put in the chat box. We have both the speaker at a time. So you are going to be more benefited. Put your doubts. And Dr. Deepu, it was such a beautiful session, no doubts. As you can see the chat box. Okay, you very beautifully placed and merged both allied and homeopathy parts. It's outstanding, doctor. So thank you so much from whole IHP family and from on behalf of all the delegates. So no need to give more thanks. You can see your chat box. So dear participants, you can ask your question. Dr. Deepu, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Actually, I was a bit fast. Actually, we have to complete the question answer session for Yeshika and.
Yeah. And we have another session also, doctor. So we can take 15 to 20 minutes for discussion. No problem. Dr. Yashika, ma'am. Dr.
Yes,
Yashika.
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Doctor, you just be ready for the question.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's only compliments, only few questions. A question from for Yashika, ma'am, from nasal polyp. After nasal polyp solution, if loss of hearing present, which medicine you prefer, doctor? What's your experience regarding this?
Yeah, I have seen Thuja and Merck very useful when there are, in fact, Kali nitricum also, but Thuja and Merck is being seen much beneficial when it's associated with hearing issues, no? So yes.
And doctor, in between the session, you very placed beautifully the remedy. Okay, so the people are asking about the potency and the repetition. So doctor, can you just suggest your experience regarding potency and the reputation of medicines?
Sure. Yeah. According to like whatever potency, obviously it depends on the susceptibility of the patient as well as the as well as the stage of the disease, seat of the disease. So what I prefer is usually for geranium. Already I told that the tincture is to be used, so you can use the dosage obviously 10 drops or 8 drops in half ounce of water. And when you talk about the potency of Agraphis, Lemna minor, or Calibi, it all depends. Like, try to use 30 potency. Try to use minimum dosage. Low potency se start. You can start, or you can use 200 also. Preferably, because of polyp, the pathology is there. The growth is there. So, 200 or 30 potency work well because of that pathology thing. Or LM potency is also very much useful because it helps to dissolve the polyp sooner when you talk about LM potency also. So yes, you can use, it depends on the case, it depends on the individuality, it depends on the totality, whatever is the prognosis. So you can accordingly select the case. Dr. Anupriya?
Yeah. Thank you so much, doctor. And I think we
Okay, I just want to make I just want to make an announcement on behalf of Homeopathy 360. Can I do so? Allow?
yes, doctor, of course you can make.
I just wanted either you only inform that the certificate link I will just post in the chat box for the certificates. I'm putting the form link. You can fill the form and then you can get the certificate of this webinar from Homeopathy 360. Mr. Manish Jain has and the team has sent this. So I've put in the chat box. That's it. Now you can continue with the session.
Okay, doctor. Okay, thank you so much. And I think our participants today will be more benefited. And it's a gift from Yashika ma'am. So thank you, ma'am, for this. It's a question for Dr.
Yeah.
Doctor, can you give a medical management in all the cases of tonsillitis, even in the case of dysphagia and all?
Definitely. See, in every case of tonsillitis, it is not always they're coming for like we have to treat the tonsillitis. So in some case of dysphagia, I will check for the size of the tonsil. If the size is much enlarged, like this, any hyperplasia is there, I will first go with the reducing the size. Then only I will go for the constitutional prescription.
Okay, doctor. And a question for ma'am. Persistent mouth breathing after nasal polyp. So your experience, ma'am, regarding persistent mouth breathing after nasal.
Opium. Yeah, opium is a very good remedy when you talk about this mouth breathing and nasal polyp is there. Thuja is also a very good. Silesia also is very good when you talk about this. Sanguinaria nitricum, but yes, opium is very good. So you can use opium.
Okay. And participants are so smart. They also combined the question recurrent tonsillitis with nasal polyp. So you can both answer.
Okay.
So I have
Okay.
already given in my, yeah. Dr. Deepu, continue.
No. So this recurrence itself shows that it is a chronic disease. So you have to take the case, and you, as you mentioned that there is yellow spot on the tonsil. It can be either a follicular chronic, either acute tonsillar follicular tonsillitis. If there is no swelling is there, then it will be the tonsils are damaged. So you should take the case and give the indicated antisoric medicine.
Okay, doctor. I think the question is over. Everybody's giving thanks. And no more questions. So can we wind up, doctor?
Yeah. We have another sections actually there actually.
Yeah. And we have deal almost all the questions. And thank you so much, doctors, for your experience. And we are very glad to see you both on the same platform. Both you are the young talents, and hope everybody inspired with you all. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such a nice session, everyone. I just want to thank Anupriya, Dr. Anupriya, as well as Dr. Deepu and Mr. Manish Jain for organizing such a session. Thank you so much.
Dr. Deepu, please some good words for our participants.
Actually, I don't know how was the session and all like that, but I will say it was only because of Yeshika I made this happen. She just encouraged me to a lot, and I was presenting
You are actually a very Dr. Deepu, you're actually a very nice speaker, I would say. This is just because I just thought so. It's like it's something you should go for it. I want to recommend that. So you deserve it
Yeah,
actually.
thank you,
Dr.
thanks.
Dr. Deepu, participants are requesting from the beginning of part that they want to see you on the screen. So, doctor, can
Oh,
you please be in the screen?
yeah, I can. Can you see me?
No.
Actually, I'm doing through my mobile phone, so I can be
Yeah, it's okay, doctor. It's okay.
come on this screen. So thank you
I
all
can
for the
see
kind.
you.
Yeah, thank you, Anupriya, for moderating the session, and thanks all the participants for patiently listening to me and Dr. Yeshika. We will upload the video for sure because we haven't shown any cases. So definitely we will upload the video in Homeopathy 360 and IHMA Hope you webinar channel. So thanks a lot for your kind words. Bye.
Hello, doctor.
Yeah, we can conclude the session, Anupriya.
Yeah, just 1 second, doctor. I just wants
Yeah.
to say something to our participants. So, participants, we want your all the dislike and likes. Okay, you just give your comments regarding today's session, regarding IHMA, regarding Deepu, Dr. Yashika ma'am, and including me also. Actually, we all have to learn each and every day. Okay, we have to improve. So, in the next session, we can provide you more and with more better ideas. So, give your suggestions. Okay, what do you like in the session? What you don't like, what you want more, okay, and where we have to improve. So you can give your suggestions in the Telegram group, in the Hope WhatsApp group, anywhere you can. And thank you so much for being a part of IHMA family. And because of all you, the session should be that much good. Okay, so thank you all for being with us. Thank you.